Hello everybody, this is Tim here again, here with another video. This time I figured I'd do something a little different. Instead of just like a standard movie review, I wanted to kind of spice it up now and do something a little bit different. This has kind of been on my mind for a little while now. I still see this kind of talk about this particular franchise I'm going to talk about online, and I'm going to go with Friday the 13th. The Friday the 13th franchise. I want to do a video discussing like the timeline of the Friday the 13th franchise and how like all the movies, you know, connect together and everything, because I still see people like today, even hardcore fans, like arguing about like the timeline of the Friday the 13th movies and what's canon, what holds together, what doesn't. So I figured I'd make a video, dive straight into that crap, and just discuss it all right here, right now, baby. Okay, we start off with the original film, Friday the 13th Part 1, directed by Sean Cunningham and written by Victor Miller. Okay, in the original film, Jason's mom is the killer. Jason is, for all intents and purposes, dead. His character is dead in the first film. Okay, he is dead. Now, with Jason being dead in the first film, at the end, his mom gets her head sliced clean off. Okay, now this is where it gets tricky. We step into Friday the 13th Part 2. Jason is now the killer, and he is back. Okay, Jason is dead in the first film. Now the second film, which was pretty much rushed out because they wanted to have a sequel, and I do enjoy Friday the 13th Part 2. I love the Friday the 13th franchise. This is discussion on the inconsistencies in the timeline and how everything, you know, connects together as a whole. But they rushed it out so they could have a sequel, and we had Jason as the villain even though he's supposed to be dead. Sean Cunningham never liked this idea. He also doesn't like the franchise. He is not a fan of the hockey mask Jason killer because that's not something he invented. His film is about a mother seeking revenge. He's never been a fan of the whole Jason motif. But we get the second film, we get what we get. Okay, according to the second film, Jason saw his mom get her head chopped off in the first film. Now whether Jason came back from the dead or he somehow survived his drowning and had been living in the woods, either way, he saw his mom get her head chopped off. Okay. Following it so far, he saw his mom get her head chopped off. So that means that Jason would have had to have been in the wood area at the time. And would have had to have been back from the dead at least since sometime after he was a kid. And either didn't find his mom because he was just scared and lost in the woods, really, and he couldn't find where she was, or the character is mentally handicapped. He just honestly couldn't find his way home. So you have two possibilities there. Either A, Jason is supernatural, came back from his drowning because of some, you know, supernatural means. In the original script for Part 2, there was going to be a flashback scene that had Jason waking up on shore on another part of the lake and coughing up like dirt and mud and everything and walking off into the woods, like somehow, you know, magically coming back to life. But it was deleted from the finished script, but it's in the novelization of Part 2 if you can find it online. I think it's priced pretty high though, but that was going to be in there. So that kind of seems like they were going for like a quasi-supernatural angle, like is Jason alive or is he dead? He's kind of like somewhat in between, you know, like The Crow, something like that. Not really like alive or dead, just kind of like in between. I would have been okay with that. But anyway, so the main character Jenny in the film theorizes that Jason saw his mom get her head chopped off and that he survived his drowning and has been living in the woods ever since. So that's what the second film tells us. So going with the second film, we could take it that Jason is just a mentally handicapped, deranged, but human hillbilly killer who's been living in the woods since his supposed drowning. Okay. That does have a lot of logic questions there, but you just taking the film at face value, you can kind of go with that. Then we jump into Friday the 13th Part 3, which pretty much goes for the same thing. And then 4, which kind of goes for the same thing. But in 3 and 4, each time Jason comes back in Part 3 and 4, he's more and more supernatural and more harder to kill. And his strength increases with each film as well. Each time he's like comes back from a near death at the end of each film, he's stronger in the sequel. So it's pretty supernatural. And in Part 3, he survives a hanging, which once again hints at him being not just human, but, you know, supernatural. You could just go for the idea that, yes, it's a horror film from the 80s. He's just a tough bastard, you know, who can't die. But at the same time, once you've reached a point to where he's being hung and he like just laughs it off and just, you know, has no effect on him, and he gets an axe in the head and still comes back. Once he's went that far, you have to say he's somewhat supernatural. For me personally, I have to say he's supernatural at that point, because you just cannot make me believe that that's a human. I can let my, you know, believability go so far, but not to that level. That's just too much for me. For me, that's too much. But if you still want to believe he's just a tough bastard, I don't blame you for going with that, and that's not a bad way to look at it. But for me, he's just too supernatural at that point from the hanging and stuff. Now, when you get up to part 5, Jason isn't in part 5. Jason isn't the killer in part 5. Big spoiler there. There's no Jason in part 5. So Friday the 13th part 5 doesn't really count because Jason is still dead, still buried, and so he's not in it. But Friday the 13th part 5, I actually used to hate, but I've actually come around to it. If you just accept the fact that it's a copycat killer and not really Jason, and it's just, sorry, I gotta move this for a minute. But yeah, if you just accept the fact that it's a copycat killer, not really Jason, it's an okay film. Still has its shortcomings and stuff, and it's still not a good movie, but it's okay. Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. This film is one of the best of the franchise. It's pretty good. This film is where things start to get really complicated, though. In this film, Jason is pretty much dug up. He's brought back to life by lightning. Okay. Right off the bat, you can either accept this is just goofy, and it's Jason's back just because they want him back. Let's just have fun with it. He's a zombie now. You can just accept that as that. Or you can look at it, you know, from more of a logical point of view, which I'm prone to do because it's just who I am, and just say, well, how come Jason's corpse can be revived by lightning? What makes his corpse any different from other people's corpses? He would have to be supernatural. And in this film is when they start changing up the mythology and retconning some of what supposedly we're supposed to take as fact in the second film about Jason having survived his drowning. In this film, they say Jason died in his drowning. Tommy Jarvis reads a book about the occult, about how to get rid of, you know, things that have been brought back from the dead, and it says to return them to their original resting place. And so he wants to put Jason back in the lake because that's where the character died. Okay, that makes logical sense. In this film, it says Jason did, in fact, drown and died, and he's been pretty much supernatural the whole friggin' time. Okay, that's a new retcon continuity thing from Part 2, if you wanted to take Part 2 as fact. Okay, we get up to Part 7, it's the same thing, they say Jason drowned. We get up to Part 8, they say Jason drowned. They're all going with the drowning idea now, that he did drown, he's always been supernatural. And in Part 8, at the end of it, he gets drowned again by toxic waste. Part 8 is the worst of the franchise to me. It sucks. It's not absolutely terrible, but it does suck. If you can just accept it like as an 80s slasher flick and just judge it on those terms, then it's like a passable movie. But looking at it from like a critical standpoint, like if you're going to view it not as a fan, but as a critic, then it does suck. But if you want to look at it just as like, you know, like as a fan or just somebody watching like an 80s slasher film and just judge it as an 80s slasher film instead of just judging it as like a movie, like, you know, in context of like every other film, forgetting the fact that it's an 80s slasher film, then it does suck. But if you just want to look at it as like an 80s slasher flick, it's passable. But anyway, so Jason gets killed by drowning again at the end of this film. And the girl, I believe she has a vision that Jason has been turned back, or has a vision of Jason's inner child. Because at the time this was meant to be the last film, and they wanted to kill Jason off by having him drowned again like he died originally. So they're going by the drowning thing again. So we get to Jason Goes to Hell. Jason is back by unexplained resurrection. They didn't want to take the time to explain how he came back from Part 8 because Part 8 was a flop and they wanted to distance herself from it. But it's not hard to believe he just got up out of the sewers and just walked back to Crystal Lake. I mean, really, that's not that big of a stretch. But anyway, so we get into Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. Now, this film is where they try to add a shitload of mythology on us. This film is very divided in the horror community. Personally, I like the unrated cut because of the awesome gore and the likable characters. And some of the horror movie in-jokes are fun. And I love Creighton Duke's character. But I can see why people wouldn't like this film. But at the same time, I have a good time with it. If I want to see Jason on the lake killing people or around a camp area, there's literally 8 other films I can get that in. This is one film that wants to do something totally different. But anyway, so try to introduce more continuity here and try to change things up once again. In this film, they pretty much say that Jason has a sister. Now, in the first film, Mrs. Voorhees states that Jason was her only child. So this means that he has to be from the father's side of the family. So she's a half-sister then. Okay, I can go with that. Okay. But now they also say that there's a magical dagger that can kill Jason. So it's like, what the hell is this? Okay, later on in the film, they discover the Necronomicon in Jason's house, his family's home. So you get the idea that Mrs. Voorhees must have resurrected Jason supernaturally, and that's the way that he came back. And the dagger in the film is also the same dagger from Evil Dead, so it connects pretty much Friday the 13th and Evil Dead exactly together. And we basically get the idea that the demon that's powering Jason and keeping him alive through all this shit in every movie is a demon from the Necronomicon, from the Bruce Campbell Evil Dead movies. Okay, that's a very wild take and something definitely totally new for the franchise. And I can understand why some people wouldn't enjoy that. But personally, I like Evil Dead. I like Friday the 13th. I have no problem with combining them and saying that Jason is a superpowered demon deadite. I have no problem with that. Was that the original intention with the first movie? No. But the original intention with the first movie was to never have a franchise and never have Jason in the films. Was that the intention with the second movie? No. They tried to say Jason was just a superpowered human. But in the later sequels, they kept adding to the mythology and changing things up and retconning stuff, that by the time you get to this one, the only way for me to logically buy why Jason has all these powers and can't die is to go full-on supernatural. I don't know any other way you could do it. And some people will say, well, maybe you shouldn't explain Jason and how he can do these things. Maybe it's better left as a mystery. That's a fair point. I mean, that is fair. You're not wrong for thinking that or wanting that. But at this point, by the time you get to a part 9, what else can you do besides explain the character and explain what makes him tick and how he can't die and just keeps coming back? I mean, what the hell else can you do creatively? I mean, is there anywhere else to go? One of the original ideas for this film was Jason Takes L.A., about 2 rival gangs banding together to have to fight Jason. That would have been pretty damn funny, but that would have just been, you know, kind of a repeat of Jason Takes Manhattan again. But anyway, or at least a better version of Jason Takes Manhattan, but kind of a similar idea. But yeah, at the end of this film, Jason gets sent to hell. Okay, Jason goes to hell with the magical dagger. Freddy vs. Jason, continuity-wise, takes place after this. Okay, Freddy brings Jason back from hell to instill fear on Elm Street so people will think it's him so he can get his powers back. By the end of that film, Freddy and Jason are fighting. Jason survives the fight. Then we go into Jason X, where some years later he's captured, and now he gets frozen and winds up in space. So this movie completely just goes crazy with its vibe and its style. And I like Jason X. I think it's a good, fun flick. I actually have fun with it. If people just accept it for the film it is, a B-movie sci-fi comedy, it's not bad. It's just not a good Friday the 13th film. But anyway, getting into this, by the end of this film, Jason is evaporating Earth 2 atmosphere, and he friggin' crash lands into another alternate brand new crystal lake on another planet, you know, and you can either accept that he's dead, completely evaporated, or it's just part of him survived and he's landing in the lake, and the franchise is just going to keep going off in sequels we'll never see, and Jason's just never ending, and he's just in a new lake and a new campground starting the series all over again, just on another planet. Which is I actually think that's a good ending for the franchise. Say what you want about Jason X. I mean, whether you like it or hate it, I think that's a fun, good ending for the franchise, because it's going to be the last film continuity-wise. Nobody's going to make a sequel to Jason X. It's just too far out there. So even if we get a prequel, you know, between 8 or 9 or something, it's still, continuity-wise, the last film. But yeah, but the confusion happens in the franchise from people who don't know if Jason drowned or not, or because some sequels, the later sequels, say he did, and then part 2 says he might not have. And because the main character says that, we have to take that at face value. So because that film says that, and the later sequels retcon it and say he did, that's what confuses fans. Really? It's whatever you want it to be, honestly. The Friday the 13th sequels weren't planned out. It was never meant to be a franchise. Jason was never meant to come back as the killer. So the fact that he came back, they had to keep trying to explain in other sequels about how to make sense of all this because the films kept going. So they would have to retcon stuff from earlier films, like explain Jason was a human in the second one, but in 3 and 4, he just keeps surviving all this crazy shit that should kill him. So in the later sequels, they had to say, no, he did drown. He's been a zombie, you know, mutant freak, whatever, the whole time. So that's why he's just able to survive everything. So no matter what way you slice it, it's really whatever you want to be. If you take all the films in the continuity, for me personally, if you take all the films in the continuity, I have to go with the explanation in Jason Goes to Hell that he's just some kind of superpowered, you know, he's a superpowered being from a demon, you know, that carries his soul. I have to go with that explanation because if I'm taking all the films in the continuity, that's the film that explains it. If you just want to go with the Paramount films, then you can either go with the fact that Jason's always been like partially superhuman in some way, like kind of quasi like living or dead in between, you know. You can go with that, or you can go with the fact that he was just a deranged, powerful human who ended up coming back as a zombie in part 6, and just ignore the fact that in 6, 7, 8 they say that he drowned and that he was pretty much always superhuman. But yeah, the reason for these continuity mishaps is because this franchise was never planned, and not really mishaps. They're just like forced like changes. Like part 2 will be like, you know, he didn't drown, and then once you get to 6, it's like no, wait, pump the brakes. He was always superhuman because, you know, now he's come back as a zombie. We got to come up with a reason for this because we want to keep making sequels. So he was always superhuman. Hell with it. So yeah, it's pretty much whatever your own personal take is from the franchise, and what you yourself as the viewer want to gather is the real explanation for why Jason is superhuman and the continuity of the series. It's whatever you want to take in as a viewer, and that's fine. I mean, that's fine. For me personally, I'm the type of person who's a completist. I love the Friday the 13th franchise. I enjoy most of them. Only the one I don't really like is the Manhattan one, which I consider the worst. I used to hate part 5, and if you see my earlier review on it, I dogged the film. Watching it now and accepting the fact that it's a copycat killer and not Jason, and just accepting that it's something different, it's not that bad. It's okay. It does still have a lot of problems. It's the second weakest cast after part 8, but it's okay. Still some fun there. And it's the last film with the classic Friday feel other than the first 4. It's an okay movie for me now. If I did a new ranking video, it'd be ranked higher. But yeah, part 8 is still the worst to me. It's just so many continuity errors in that one. And it's not like continuity errors like retcons, it's just continuity errors because the director was just like lazy and didn't pay attention to the previous 7 films. That's the kind of continuity that really bugs me. Like the retconning about whether Jason drowned or not, that's each director's own personal interpretation. That doesn't really bother me. It's whatever they want to go with. But just being lazy about whether Jason was deformed or not when he obviously was in the first 7 films when he was a kid, that's just lazy. That bothers me. It's a passable 80s slasher flick if you just want to watch it as that, but judging it critically as a movie, like dissecting it, it does suck. But yeah, all in all for the franchise, I just wanted to do a video talking about the continuity of it and how people still debate whether Jason drowned and stuff like that. Really, the explanation for that is it's up to you as a viewer. It depends on what you want to take away and what elements you like in the Friday the 13th franchise. If you like the supernatural elements of the later sequels, then you're not wrong for thinking Jason drowned and has always been, you know, part zombie for every film. You are not wrong for that. You are completely valid 100% in that. If you like Jason Goes to Hell and you want to go with the idea that Jason's always been superhuman and been pretty much a superpowered deadite from Evil Dead, you're valid in that. You are not wrong. If you want to go with the fact that he was human in the first 4 films and turned into a zombie only in part 6, you're valid in that. You're not wrong there. It's whatever you want it to be based off your own personal perception of what the movies present to you, what parts that you like and want to accept as canon for yourself, because the franchise was just never thought out. For me personally, like I said, I have to take all as canon and just go with what the films ultimately present me as why Jason just cannot die. And that's what part 9 did, and so I'm fine with that. But for other people, it's going to be up to your own personal views. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, just shit talking about the Friday the 13th continuity and the franchise as a whole, and I'll see you guys again with another video.